Hello and welcome to CDO Magazine interview series. My name is John Filipek with SHI International Corp. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Ken Clarke, the Assistant Director at the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. How are you doing today, Ken?
Doing great, John. Thanks a lot. And I really want to thank CDO Magazine for the opportunity to be with you today.
What do you believe, I guess, is the difference between the data governance and the quality of how they can complement one another? Obviously, you mentioned in there that data integrity is so crucial to building out a good plan, right? You can have a great framework, but if the input that goes into said framework is not going to benefit you based on it not being clean data, you're going to get obviously answers that are taking you down a path that you don't necessarily want to be on. So outside of obviously having the individual contributors bought into making sure that they're taking their time and due diligence, with the data and making sure it gets into a good spot, what are some of the things from your particular position that you're either able to spot check on during some of those processes, or how do you, I guess, ensure the cleanliness of the data that's going into this machine that you're ultimately building to get to your yes?
Yeah. Well, I would say, John, the first thing to differentiate the question you had is, first of all, I would suggest to you that data quality is an outcome of having good data governance.
Okay.
If you look at data governance, that's really the enabler. That's the foundation that ensures that you have good classification of your data, you have clear ownership of your data, and you have good prioritization. So I would say, again, it's being an outcome. But I would also suggest too that there are various aspects of what constitutes data quality, and I refer you back again to DAMA and International on what they looked at as far as they looked at 6 different data quality dimensions. The first is uniqueness, and making sure that nothing's recorded more than once, based on the identification of it. You want to look at that integrity, and again, I think your data governance process, first of all, having a data inventory where you're able to, first of all, get the word out on where the data is, who has it, and then again, that way you're not recreating the same data, but you know who to go to get that data and to use it, and of course, work within the parameters that they have on how you're going to use the data. The other thing, the second point that they have is accuracy, and actually just making sure that you're describing what the thing is, what the object is, or what the event is, and it's accurate, and you maintain that accuracy. And I think that's where configuration control boards. I mean, I've started up configuration control boards in my past in the area of information technology and also in data. And I think it's very important because that maintains the integrity of the data set or the system that you're talking about, and that there's a ordered and understood process and communicated process when you have to make changes, so that you can maintain that accuracy. And also the third point, or the third dimension, is consistency, making sure you don't have variations that are describing the same object or event. And again, that goes back to the benefits of having a configuration management process, configuration control board, a data management board, whatever you want to call it, but something where you're bringing parties together. Completeness, trying to get to the 100% solution or the 100% depiction of what the object or the event is. And I think that's where having the data strategy is important. Knowing, what are the business drivers? What are you trying to get from the use of your data, and how that ties to the strategy? And that's going to help you come up with the completeness dimension that we talked about. Timeliness, how you can represent the reality of the event or the object in time. I think that can be tied to good program management processes, having good schedule management, an integrated master schedule for all the different programs you have, where the dependencies are, who's bringing or who has an obligation to bring certain aspects of data in order to ensure that the entire data set is going to be used. And then finally, the sixth dimension that DAMA talks about is validity, and then ensuring that you're conforming to some level of syntax, your formats, and your type and range of data. And that's where your data dictionaries, where your I mentioned metadata before, is going to be something that if you have those forms of record, and those forms of record are known throughout the community through the various boards or processes you have, that can maintain the validity. So I think that's, those are some pretty powerful dimensions to think about as you're trying, again, the outcome being data quality, and then the governance process.
Yeah, having it, instead of comparing one versus the other, it's obviously one helping get you to the other, and then having the two sides kind of work together in tandem once you get it there. So you mentioned a couple times about the boards that you've put together. How often, within your particular organization, do those individuals get together to meet, kind of review, the different things that you guys have spun up and put in place, and kind of just take temperature checks on, making sure that you're still working to that yes that you mentioned, right? It's almost, I feel like very beneficial to, of course, work towards the outcome, because you know where you should eventually land, but that can sometimes be a very tedious work, right? Because it can only be thrown off in some instances by a very small fraction of the data, especially when you're talking about data and patterns and some of the things that are ultimately kind of driving some of those outcomes for you. So how often does that team get together and kind of discuss what they're seeing in real time throughout the framework and what you've spun up?
Sure. Well, in my current capacity, I'm not actually running the boards, but in the past, now I will say, I do have to caveat, is the boards that I've run in the past, I would have to say use the term pre-COVID, because they were boards where we had to schedule the time when people could come to the facility, and they could sit around the table, and we could go through the agenda, we could go through the change requests and such. And I guess one of the benefits of working in a virtual environment now is that you can have much more of those virtual meetings, sometimes called on a moment's notice, or they can be ad hoc, versus having to rely on people's commuting patterns and availability, whether they happen to be on travel. Now, somebody can be overseas and they can still be part of a board. I think it's important that you don't overmeet, and you don't have too many meetings, because there can be meeting fatigue, and then of course it can collide with other meeting requirements, and then at some point you're not going to, of course, get much done if you're meeting all the time. But I think there are good collaborative tools out there, shared working spaces that you can use, such as this platform that we're using, where you can have these frequent boards, or you can just do virtual or offline meetings, where you would essentially say, hey, this document needs to be reviewed. Are there any objections to it? I'm actually on a data integrity board where I periodically review requests for continuing agreements with data sharing across the enterprise, and many cases it's those are done virtually, where I can actually get the agreement, review what the requirement is, and then I'll put my vote down and send that in, and that constitutes the agreement. So I think I think it's important to have everybody together at times. Maybe on a monthly basis isn't too frequent sometimes, but it also depends on what's the issue, what's the agenda item you're working. That's going to modulate how many times you meet. But again, looking at virtual tools or virtual workspaces where you can review documents or requirements and vote on them, and then those are aggregated and put out for the broader community.
And then to wrap up this particular section, then, and I may know where we're headed just based on the conversation so far, but maybe you'll surprise me. Right? What do you feel is the most beneficial piece of having, data governance?
Well, I think that really at the end of the day, it's giving you better situational awareness. Ensley and Garland defined situation awareness of giving you the perceptions of what's in your environment, and then also a comprehension of what their meaning is, and then also projections on how the forecasting and how that's going to affect you in the future. I think having a data governance plan avoids surprises. Not only if it's collaboratively put together, you have full participation. So there's that unity of effort that I mentioned earlier. Again, at the end of the day, what we're looking for is unity of effort, and that's based on collective action. And the key drivers for collective action are trust as well as reciprocity. You have to have, if you're sharing data with me, John, and I'm not sending data back to you to help your mission, your business needs, at some point it becomes one-sided, and it's like, well, what's the return on investment for you to be continually sharing data when I'm not sharing with you? So I think reciprocity and trust are key for the collective action if you and I are mission partners in the data management world. So I think that's important with the unity of effort. Also, it's promoting a common culture, a common relationship across the parties. Of course, I mentioned it's going to be visible and transparent. The plan is clear. It gives situational awareness to everyone on what the data is, how it's being used, what are the business needs, who has the data, again, with the data inventory, all of that. And even at the end of the day, it puts in a process. Somebody told me one time, hey, the bad guys only have to get it right once, but we have to get it right each and every time. When it comes to national security or law enforcement issues, is we have to be getting it right each and every time. And the only way to do that is having that good data governance process. But it also brings, again, when we talked about frameworks earlier, it brings together the business owners and the compliance organizations and the information technology organizations and demystifies the technology. Everybody has a role in building the cloud. Everybody has a part in building the cloud. And I think having that data governance plan helps organizations move in that necessary direction.
Yes, and thank you again, Dr. Clarke, for joining me today. Thank you once again for your service. I don't want that to go, unmentioned again. For those watching or listening, please feel free to visit cdomagazine.tech for any additional interviews and content. And we appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much.